Sunday, 17th of March 2019, 12:41 p.m. Benjamin Baker. The Social and the Extrasocial, from the American Journal of Sociology, 1899, pages 649 to 655. This is an extract. Section 4. I suppose. Section 313A. Subsection 4. I don't know. Extrasocial conditions. While considering as we have the two intrasocial or psychological forces which we have now discussed as the only true social forces, we should not overlook the very important group of influences which condition the sociological movement. These influences are really, so to speak, the banks or barriers which set limits to the social current, and even by interaction with the strictly social forces, leave their marks within the social body. Their relation to the social forces, properly so called, is similar to that which the psychologists recognize between the strictly psychological and the physiological. The various states of the body, such as intoxication, fatigue, starvation, overnourishment, affect the mind, and so can influence the individual's mental development, but we do not call them psychological forces. They are of psychological value only because through the sorts of stimulation and limitation which they afford, they condition certain uniform results in the psychological organization itself. The analogy thus cited between the extrasocial influences with the effects they bring about in the social whole, and the extramental or physiological influences which, with their influence upon the individual's mental life, is indeed more than an analogy. When we reflect, we find that it is through the connection of mind and body, one term of the analogy, that the extrasocial forces, the other term of the analogy, get their value. It becomes therefore still more apparent that we cannot call the influences enumerated below social forces, for so far they are from having direct value in the organization of society that they become factors in the organization only by the indirect route of stimulation to the nervous system of individuals. There's a note on the social and the extrasocial. The form of this brief article and its allusions are due to its consisting of certain new sections added by the writer in the new editions of his work, Social and Ethical Interpretations. I don't know the author. Or he's not mentioned. It would be just as appropriate to call blood changes psychological facts as to call physical changes, such as the cutting of the Suez Canal, social facts. Yet both undoubtedly deserve recognition in a philosophical statement of all the determining conditions in these two branches of knowledge. The sort of conditions which I mean by the phrase extrasocial will appear from the enumeration below. It does not claim to be complete, however. Their full discussion does not come within our province, seeing that they are extra-psychological. Okay, 1. Paragraph 1, group selection described above in section 120, which is unavailable, I think. In group selection, we have a condition of enormous importance in the development of social aggregations, especially in the instinctive and spontaneous periods, that is, of so-called, quote, companies. It holds, however, for all societies when the conditions are such that groups come into competition, not in the real war, but commercial and social wars of all kinds, illustrate group selection. The working of the principle is strictly analogous, indeed identical, with that of natural selection in biology, an analogy excellently worked out by Bagehot in his remarkable work Physics and Politics. It is one of the foundation stones of S. Alexander's work Moral Order and Progress. Bagehot, I suppose that's how you pronounce it, acutely recognizes the distinction, without explicitly drawing it, between group selection as a condition of evolution in the earlier stages of human aggregation and the operation of the real social force of, quote, discussion, described above under the heading, quote, generalization, in the higher forms. It is, moreover, an additional proof that group selection is a condition, and not a social force, that there is the difference between the lower and the higher, for the lower are determined, as we have seen, very largely by biological principles, such as instinct and physical heredity. They do not involve the social progress which the operation of the psychological forces brings in later on, yet it is just there that group selection is all-important. Marked with a note, the corresponding truth has often been pointed out. See Cope, Primary Factors of Evolution. you wouldn't really find these books outside of some strange old archive or giant library, you know. Okay. Maybe online. Not sure where there's probably endless repositories of texts. Blah, blah, blah. Revolution, Chapter 7, Cattell, Science, NS, Volume 3, page 668, Baldwin, Psychological Review, Volume 4, 1897, page 219. That natural selection in biological evolution is not a force or cause, but a condition. Spencer's phrase, quote, survival of the fittest, itself analyzes natural selection. The fitness is assumed, it is due to earlier real causes, the survival of selection with which, quote, natural selection formulates is an ex post facto statement of results. It merely states that no further force of a positive sort is necessary, as against, for example, quote, special creation. The distinction between, quote, forces which are intrinsic and, quote, conditions which are not intrinsic to the particular content might well be traced through the sciences from biology to ethics. 2. Individual selection, which is natural selection working upon individuals who are brought into competition with one another for life and death. For instance, let us suppose a man of genius who has not yet given to the world his invention, his machine which, if produced by him, would have great influence upon the condition of the working classes, that this man meets a burglar in his library and is shot dead. Here is a case of natural selection which determines the course of social evolution in a nation or in the world by the elimination of an individual. Such a case shows that the natural selection of individuals is a condition of importance when the individuals are important in a social development, but it is not a force. Even in biology, as we have just seen, it is a negative condition, a statement in sociology as in biology, of evolution as it is rather than as it would have been if the conditions had been other. This again is of special importance in those stages of sociality in which the direct competition of individuals by physical strength or mental acuteness is in full operation. Okay. The intrusion of this, quote, physiological cycle in an earlier place, section 43, we saw that the, quote, cycle of causation, which psychological and sociological facts, such as beliefs, desires, etc., represent, often intrudes upon the operation of the, quote, physiological cycle by the personal selection of individuals in marriage. The physical heredity of the individuals is due to the mixed strains of the parents, and is in part therefore determined by the mutual choice of each other. The converse is also true. The physiological intrudes upon the sociological and thus becomes an, quote, extra-social condition in its determination. This is in all cases in which physical heredity results in individuals or groups which incapacitate them, especially endow them or modify in any way their social fitness. A tall, manly race of men, my father's lineage, would have social advantages in winning wives from a higher group, hopefully. And such marriages would tell at once inside their own group, where social preference depended upon physical prowess. The inherited clubfoot would be an element of social unfitness. In the fact of what is called physical, quote, presence, probably larger a matter of posture and vitality, we all recognize an easy substitute in many social positions for brains, culture, or oratorical gifts. Yet these things are not in themselves social, nor can they, by any manipulation, become social. The influence they have is entirely through the psychological states of which they are the conditions. A man with the illusion of a clubfoot would be as helpless as if it were real, and whereas the hero is so commonplace that his, quote, presence is not lordly to some lovesick maid. But 4, then there are the much talked of physical conditions, the, quote, the broken earth and the vaulted sky, the canal and the river course, the mountain and the meadow. These, we are told, determine social development. They do, but by conditioning it, by intrusion upon it, by limiting it, not by being themselves social. That they are never. Let a race of animals that cannot think, nor recognize a social situation, nor know one another as reciprocating and fulfilling social give and take, run over the meadows and swim in the rivers. under a sky never so blue, and what effect of a social kind would these physical things have upon them? But given this psychological traits make them men, and then what would not the human race do, even on the levelest plane? Here again we have extra-social conditions, the land and the water conditions, separation and segregation, competition and mutual defense, toleration and alliance, commerce and confederation. But the essentials of social matter and process must be there, and it is they that work under these conditions of all those. Again, an illustration from recent biological theory, a case which often turns upon the effects of such physical differences as those mentioned. Isolation has been said to be a biological force, since when animals are isolated from each other, the race is prevented from having the immixture of their hereditary strains, and so the heredity of the race is pre-limited. True as a fact, but why make an abstraction do justice for a force? The isolation is always accomplished by some real force, say a whirlwind which blows away the isolated individuals. But the biological forces are the life processes in those which are left. The whirlwind is the condition by which the result has been in a measure negatively determined. But who would say that the whirlwind is a biological force? At the most, it is an intrusion of physics into the biological cycle. Just so with all the physical changes considered as influencing social life and development, they are conditions, intrusions from physics, not social forces. The consideration of these extra social conditions confirms us, therefore, in our view, that only psychological sources of change, with note, and these of a particular sort. Inside of psychology, the same distinction is to be made between, quote, conditions and, quote, social forces, not even all thoughts, as have been represented as saying, but certain thoughts, see sociology and ethics, interpretation, sections 335, not relevant, become social. Beliefs, desires, appetites, etc. are psychological conditions of the social. The consideration of these extra social conditions confirms, as well, can be called, quote, social forces, even in the figurative sense in which it is legitimate to use that word at all. Noted. Come to note. Figurative, since, quote, force is a physical conception, it means that which produces a change of rest or motion, and the sorts of forces are those producers of change which manifest themselves under different but constant physical conditions. We speak of mental, sociological, etc. forces in the analogous case of change in the phenomena of one of these several orders, and to give the term any intelligible meaning, we must keep within the particular order of phenomena as strictly as does the physicist in defining his forces always in terms of motion in space, which determines other motion in space. In other words, the force is intrinsic or internal to the movement in which it is said to be manifested. We've got 3 more pages, so we'll leave it there just for now.